Hello, everyone, and how was everybody's week? Mine was filled with a lot of fun. My daughter recently learned how to crochet a top for herself to go to a concert. So I'm a very proud mama bear this week, and after she was done completing that, she went on to bake cookies. Think that there isn't a moment where I'm not incredibly proud of my children on a day-to-day basis. But this week had a particularly lovely end to it. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about a tribute to Robodebt and more, to a mother losing her son in the Robodebt saga. Morrison was looking for issues surrounding welfare reform. Dutton's always been a monster, and I'm going to show you a clip to give you an idea. How are the Americans feeling about Rupert Murdoch? The RBA's conversation on the new $5 note, running the economy off the back of the poor, lower the pension age for the Aboriginal community, Angus Taylor's scare campaign, New South Wales Parliment shut down, what forced that? Lida Thorpe not to be charged after the Mardi Gras police float she lay down in front of it, and the police have decided not to charge her for it as it's considered part of the protest. Google to block content for social media in Canada. So let's get started. So the Robodebt saga we've been talking about each and every week for quite a while. Even before the Robodebt Royal Commission, there was heavy emphasis around the how illegal the system was, and why I believe that this is one of the most fraudulent, abhorrent schemes that the LNP ruthlessly took charge of in an attempt to humiliate and cut off people that were in desperate need of welfare help, particularly gruesome given the economy is not at its best. And the class action lawsuit, which Bill Shorten played a major role in seeing happen, is a very interesting moment to which side actively fights that kind of misuse and abuse of poor people to someone actively helping them. You know, there is a contrast here. Bill Shorten made sure these people seeing justice and advised as many people that he could get so they could equally be compensated for what Robodebt had done. So let's have a look at a tribute to a mother's tribute to her son during the Robodebt Royal Commission and more. Okay, let's get it going, guys. Okay, this is Jenny Miller, given a chance to say some final words. Her son, Rise, was a beautiful, loving man and will never be forgotten. Thank you so much, Jenny, for what you are doing for your son and for the victims. It is just an incredible act of understanding from all of us that this woman is able to talk. I doubt I would have the same strength she does. These are people that when you hear their stories, you're almost flabbergasted that they have the strength to wake up each day, let alone to do what they're doing, to fight for their children when after they've buried them. So let's have a look at that.
It's been very difficult to obviously keep persisting with trying to gain the truth, and of course through now the Royal Commission, I have been able to obtain the truth, and I'm truly, truly forever grateful to everyone who has supported me throughout this whole time. I do, when I first was seeing a lot of this information, it certainly broke my heart because I felt like I let Reece down not knowing a lot more than I think I should have. But he was certainly let down by the system. I find it extraordinary the lengths they have been to try and get me to stop being so persistent. And I truly, truly hope that this now sets up a precedent that you're working in public office, you are there to work for the people. So do your job and do it properly, you know. And it all became very sly and just everyone was lying and covering each other's backs. And it just really, once I saw all the information that we have, it was both heartbreaking, but also vindicating, seeing that we've been able to get the truth out for Reece. Yeah. So I do thank everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner. I did not have any further.
So this mother highlights the importance of transparency. Now, regardless the amount of testimony that has had to be dragged from a lot of the people giving it, particularly obstructing the information that was already known, and the people asking the questions have done an amazing job. They basically were able to know the answers to the questions they were asking, but particularly to do with emails. They're like, okay, you have a correspondence here, and I have evidence of that correspondence, so please tell us the truth. And they were kind of, they didn't say it that plainly, but that was basically what was happening. And along the lines, it was going as a little bit of a dance of, well, you probably don't know everything quite yet, so I get to dance around and say that I need to come back and tell you what, you want to know. And then they're like, no, here's the evidence. And then they've had to go, oh, yeah, I do remember, And that's the tragedy of this moment. Understanding that this is a tragic event, and there's been a lot of, oh, it's not my fault, it's the other person's fault, or if it's my fault, it's because I was told to do it, or I totally thought it was legal, I swear to God. No, none of it was legal. You ignored legal advice, which told you that it wasn't legal. There isn't a way to avoid that simple premise. But let's start there. Why would you ignore the legal side of this? Where that was openly saying, hey, no, this doesn't look legal. What's wrong with you? And they pursued it anyway. This is why I believe certain members of the LNP should be in jail. This is not negotiable. It's robbing people of actually being able to live lives. What they did here is they stole whole families of members and created debts that they knew never existed. It doesn't matter that they thought that the welfare system was ineffective. They had no right to do damage like what happened to Reece. That's tragic. To hear tales that are horrific in nature, And then the government's persistence, even after he was gone, to keep his mother quiet is just a heartbreaking tale. And she wasn't going to stop. Oh no, that the idiots were that stupid about this that they thought, no, we will do everything we can to make her uncomfortable with this. And then she's looked at it and then gone, I've already lost the greatest thing I'll ever have. I've got nothing more to lose. I'm going to keep fighting. And that is a mother's love. And it's the kind of love that you can't add words to it. I don't know if there's ever that kind of strength within me with my children. But I know to see her, it's someone that I definitely look up to, and it's the kind of person I would want to be if I was in her awful position. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but my goodness, that's horrendous. Okay. So, Service Australia employee, Jeanette, hold on, we will pull it up so you'll see what I'm referring to. Okay. Services Australia employee Janine Marie Blake took part in Mr. Ryman's Robodebt pilot and was able to recall just about everything, claiming, I remember. If you haven't watched it, watch the series below and compare how much he claims to recall compared to Janine. Okay.
Hypothetical scenario without further evidence to corroborate the assumption. Concluding the assumption is true would be engaging in speculation.
Yes, okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Well, if you accept and appreciate it, that this basis of assuming that you could legitimately, or that you could average PAYG data so as to reflect fortnightly income, if you accepted that that wasn't feasible, wasn't viable, how was this system allowed to be set up on that basis? What was your thinking?
The thinking was it was about using the best information we had at the time to make the determination.
Even if it was meaningless information, really, because it just wouldn't be true for a great number of recipients.
Wouldn't be true, it wouldn't be completely accurate.
Well, it wouldn't be any use at all for many because it just wouldn't have been the way they earned their income. I'm just trying to understand how it was rationalised. Somebody must have thought this is okay. Was it because you thought, oh, well, they can disagree with us if they want to? Or what's the thinking here? Can you remember?
I think, well, the recollection of the thinking is really getting the customer to engage and to confirm their information and to provide information relevant to the...
Given the fact that in a lot of these cases, I don't know how many people are aware of this. If you've been following this along, you're fully aware that the testimony that he's previously given was he was fully aware that they weren't attaching the phone number to call Centrelink. And it's not until the legal department said, hey, even though you want more people to engage online, there's a huge elderly population that do not engage online and will not have that ability. So they were forced to provide the phone number to contact Centrelink, and then they were doing things that was obstructing them from being able to talk to an operator that was with Centrelink, that was actively helping them. And what they were doing is that at the same time, they were actively getting overseas people to man these stations that had no idea on these programs. So people were being forced into debts And even when they were trying to reconcile these debts, Centrelink was basically told, do not help these people. And there was a lot of Centrelink people saying, hey, we should be really trying to help these people. The people that were trying to stop this were either fired through different means of different work reasons, like either they took a too long lunch break or they didn't file the correct paperwork for something or other. They couldn't fire them directly for the Robodebt implementation, because that would have given them grounds later on for unfair dismissal. So what they were essentially doing was gutting out anyone who disagreed with this system. And he's fully aware of that. Fully aware of that. This is testimony that he has heard and knows about. He actively knows that. And this avoidance of, well, I just thought people would engage how? How? And even if they got the opportunity to engage, were they engaging with someone that was with good faith to be able to correct the problem? In the early days, as Robodebt started, I myself received a Robodebt amount of $13,000 in the very, very beginning, like before it really launched to be this big thing. And Centrelink was quite quick to deal with it and then say, there's no way you owe $13,000, and for what? And I was at a time when I was still studying, so it was way before, it was like from years before. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't look right. And they very quickly determined after a 2-week investigation that I didn't owe a thing. Worse than that is that they eventually had to pay me $1,000, and they realized that they'd been underpaying me. It was a whole thing. But this was not the same experience for many people. As the Robodebt sort of went down the road, they were making it harder and harder for people to argue the legitimacy of these claims. And he knows that. He knows that. So it's you're seeing the way that he's avoiding answering direct questions. He knows. And there have been people that give testimony that directly contradicts him, and he knows it. That's why there's a talk of what Janine gave. She gave an amazing set of testimony.
The query we're sending them about the anomaly, yeah.
Oh my gosh, my internet is.
But you knew a lot of customers just didn't engage, didn't you? When they got a query from the department, particularly past customers, I would think.
I'm not sure we knew that precisely at the time.
So this is where he's being obstructive. He knows that a lot of people that no longer needed Centrelink's assistance had little to no time to engage their services. It was like you had to go in between these certain hours, and then you had to engage with a certain person that was working on your file. And it was like this whole thing. And they were basically knowing of that information. So what he's basically setting up, I don't really know. He knows full well that it was like a lot of these people weren't able to engage their particular caseworker for these debts. And that's how it was derived. They were deliberate caseworkers were set to a certain amount of debts. And the list was so long for some people that they really couldn't take enough time to actually actively assess. Because at this same time, Centrelink was being gutted, like of all its frontline workers. It was just being slaughtered. And this meant that the caseloads for everyone was increasing. So remember, this was by design, to force people to pay debts that they weren't able to prove that they didn't owe because there wasn't enough. And that was like time restricted too. You would have like this date that it all had to be settled. So remember that too. And then if you didn't settle it by that date, they would start garnishing your payments. So it was really, really evil and conniving what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say, well, I'm not really sure what the full engagement would have been. They had data which showed the level of engagement with the Centrelink office was very little. They get very little engagements with the actual public. And the reason for that is one section is online altogether. And then there's a whole nother thing where, because they were forcing people to go online, they weren't making it easy for people to go in there and have a sit down conversation. And then they were merging like all of Medicare into it as well at around the same time. So then they were dividing the workers from Centrelink into Medicare, and it was just a major disaster waiting to happen. So if you think about it like this, every avenue that people had to dispute this was being blocked and challenged at their every whim. And how many people had receipts from a decade beforehand? Because that's how far back they were reaching. That was my original debt. It happened for something when I was still studying in my youth, before I'd even had children. It was amazing. Like, I couldn't believe that they were trying that. And to say that I owed them $13,000, it's like, where did you arrive at that particular amount? That was weird. So now we're going to talk about Morrison's role in this, because his role is particularly grotesque. So let's have a look at the little smirking man's response to that. So Morrison was looking for problems in the Robodebt saga, but he wasn't just looking for problems. He was looking for ways to come about the thinking of, well, there's got to be issues, right? So wherever there's an issue, you just cut it. And that's how he got to the Robodebt saga. You know, and he knew that this averaging was bullshit. He can tell everybody something else. But this cruel, heartless, gutless coward knew precisely what he was implementing. And if that smirk is something that I think a lot of people are thoroughly over. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison showed little empathy towards welfare recipients as he looked for budget cuts instead of policies. The Robodebt Royal Commission has been told. Serena Wilson, a former Deputy Secretary into the Social Services Department, told the inquiry into the illegal scheme. It was her recollection that the government rarely started a policy discussions about the problems, but rather focused on finding cost savings. In other words, they didn't want to fix the system, they just wanted to gut the system. And that was basically the whole point to this. Asked Mr. Morrison about his comments of being a welfare cop. She said that the government appeared to be looking for a problem. In an email, she wrote they had a strong view of deserving and undeserving poor. In my opinion, there was little empathy or understanding for those in need of disadvantaged people within the coalition government and ministerial staff. Ms. Wilson said that there was exemplified in a coalition budgets between 2014 and 2018, where the vast majority of her work involved identifying savings options to cut social security expenditure. Understand that every Conservative government that I have come in contact with will do precisely this. The model isn't new, they just find different ways of doing the exact same thing. So understand, whether you're talking the US, Australia, or England, you will find the modeling for a way to attack the poor. And it's purely because it makes the rich a lot of money and because their cruelty knows no bounds. So understand, people, if you are a Conservative voter, that is the very worst type of human being you can be. I don't care if it's more beneficial for you financially to be so, but to do it means that you actively hate the poor. You actively want to attack the poor to be Conservative. And there is no question about that, because each and every time a Conservative government gets power, they do stuff like this, and they get more and more game about what they're doing. This Robodebt thing, if there's no accountability for it, absolutely we're in trouble. We will see worse if they ever get in control again. Former Human Services Department Manager Scott Britton said finding savings was the biggest imperative, and that there was a lot of pressure to get on with it. There was a lot of pressure to just get through it. He said, later describing it as unrelenting. So that's basically a way of saying, you know what, just find the damn savings, gut it, and then to hell with what happens to the people that required that help. It was focused purely on savings. An email to Mr. Britton said that the Service Department lawyers suggested that the foundation of the scheme doesn't accord with Social Security legislation. Now, what that's referring to is a deliberate slice of legislation that says about helping the poor and people who need to engage their services for whatever reason. Okay? And they're vast. No two reasons are going to be fundamentally the same. If you're a single mother, is very different to a retiring person. If you're a person who's in seeking of youth allowance or a widow, there is a significant difference in need to the welfare person. But understand that there was legislation that said that you couldn't be fundamentally attacking it in this way. And it was designed to protect people. Mr. Britton said that there was never shown legal advice, explicitly said the scheme was illegal. But I'd heard probably, maybe, possibly. He said, now this is a deeply illegal action. This is why I think jail can't be underestimated here. Somebody should be going to jail for this, starting with Mr. Morrison. I think our feckless amount of justice around this will be, if it was you or I, they wouldn't hesitate. But they're going to be feckless because they're concerned about it looking like some sort of attack. I do not see someone going to jail for this, which is disgraceful. And definitely Morrison should be in jail for this. And Christian Porter and Alan Tudgett and a lot of them. But at an hindsight, he would take the wordings of the email to mean it was legal. Mr. Wilson also said that the government held a fairly pejorative view of many of the people on welfare, particularly those on New Start, JobKeeper and Youth Allowance, who were receiving payments because they were unemployed. The Commission has been told senior bureaucrats were aware of the potentially illegality of the scheme, and but were either overruled in people in the charge of deciding the department's policy or too scared to come forward. Because, like I said, anyone coming forward fighting it, they were basically told you don't have a job anymore. So you had to be as horrible as the people running it. Mr. Wilson said despite the feeling of intimidation and bullying from a former department secretary, she had no reason not to doubt her assurances that the income averaging wasn't being used. She was surprised when she found out that income averaging was being used. Miss Wilson denied deliberately looking for other ways to palm off responsibility to bureaucrats. She said that she failed to pick up income averaging was being used in a document which she had marked hand outlined more than 860,000 likely incorrect payments from the tax file data between 2010 and 2013. That's tragic. And that is passing the buck as far as I'm concerned. The income averaging method with using the tax office data was later ruled to be illegal. I regret it slipped through, Miss Wilson said, saying that she had been distracted by other tasks. No, this is what I mean. Accountability is must. This is your job to be on top of this. You know, that very big income that you get to monitor crap like this? Are you kidding me? There was no excuse for this. It wasn't hear no evil, see no evil situation. We're extremely stretching area of the organisation. Miss Wilson said in response to the accusation, she turned a blind eye. Of course she did. Assistant Counsel Justin Gregory didn't accept Miss Wilson's defence. Your evidence, the way you claim you do not recall the obvious points in time at which these things ought to have been obvious, is you reconstructing events to protect your own interests. He said Miss Wilson rejected the assertion. I have acknowledged that I wish to have done things differently. I know how to ask more questions, but I reject that entirely, she said. They weren't giving anyone any opportunity to find a way out of this. Understand that that was the goal. The goal was not to look at welfare and restructure it, was to gut it. Okay. So I found a clip on Twitter where it exposes the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, as always being a monster. So take a look at this video clip of Peter Dutton always being a monster and being clueless in his role. So hope you get to see this and share it around, because I think it's grotesque. Okay.
You said that a 5-year-old boy was led away by 3 asylum seekers, and that caused the mood to elevate quite quickly. Now, that's
Damn internet. Oh.
not true, is it?
Of course, it is true, and the briefing.
It's not true.
It is true, and the briefing that I've had is particularly succinct and clear.
A briefing from who gave you this information? Well, you didn't speak with the police commander, clearly.
Well, I can give you the facts in relation to it, or you can take
well,
the Twitter
let me
version.
give you what I understand the facts
Sure.
to be. The boy wasn't 5; he was 10. It didn't happen on the day of the disturbance. It happened a week before the disturbance. And there's CCTV footage outside of tent number 1 that shows the boy went inside, and the people are packing fruit into plastic bags. They gave him the fruit and he left.
Had been a ramping up in terms of the mood on the ground over a period of time, which included a sexual assault to which you've made no reference, separate to any incident
the
that we're
sexual
talking
assault
about
you're
here.
talking about, 2 people have been charged with sexual assault.
Yes.
They deny the charges.
So,
right?
as you would imagine,
but they deny the charges.
So let it go to
But
court.
you're an ex-Queensland policeman. You know that you're presumed innocent, don't you?
Of course, but you're going to the mood on the ground, which is not something you need to prove beyond reasonable doubt in court. There is this incident which is being investigated by the police.
When you're an idiot, and you need to not say you're an idiot openly. This is Peter Dutton trying to strong arm Barry Cassidy in this case. This is an old clip. Keep that in mind. And this is to do with a child which they were making unsubstantiated claims about, and to do with age and everything else. And making claims about what happened to him on a particular day that he visited.
Now that will run its course. And
the police
people
are
can make their
investigating this incident around the 5-year-old boy.
Yes, they are.
Do they understand he's 10 and not 5?
Well, I'll leave the detail to them to explain.
The detail is important in these matters.
Well, it is, but if your claim is that the mood on the ground hadn't been elevated...
No, it's not my claim. The police commander says that there's CCTV footage showing that the boy was waiting outside the gate. He was looking for food. Food was placed into a plastic bag and given to him. He was 10 years old. It happened a week before the disturbance, and he left. That's the extent of it. Now, how is that relevant to anything?
Well, Barry, I'm not sure whether you can be the judge, jury, and executioner in this matter.
No, but neither can Peter Dutton, and that's precisely what he was doing by referencing this particular instance. This is why he's a deliberate douchebag. He knows he's lying, and Barry Cassidy will not stop and let him get away with it. This is an ex-police officer. He should know better, but doesn't.
Police commander has said this.
So let's allow the police investigation to be conducted.
Well, why didn't you do that?
Why
didn't you let that happen?
I've received different advice from that.
Why didn't you let the investigation happen before you preempted?
Advice to me.
Do you accept that you got some of the information badly wrong?
No, I do not. And again,
the age of the boy.
You've read
the
off
police
Twitter,
commander said that
fine.
this happened because there was a soccer game going on beyond a 6 o'clock curfew. Right, that's what caused the disturbance. And he said that some of the PNG soldiers were drunk, and yet you put all the blame on the asylum seeker.
Yeah. That's who Dutton is. Make no mistake, that will always be the monster. This is like no different to what Forrest Twiggy did. Forrest Twiggy made up a claim about Aboriginal girls to justify the Healthy Welfare Card. Absolutely he did. And then later when he was questioned about it, precisely that, he had to say he never made those claims at all. It was repugnant to its core. The very same treatment of asylum seekers and the lie around precisely what happened needs to be put out there, that it's disgraceful to insinuate men that are seeking genuine refugee status were harming children. It was designed to demonize those in need of help. And Mr. Dutton can play semantics all he likes. He knew precisely what he was doing. And he got the headline that he wanted. And it didn't matter what the facts were. He got to set the narrative. And all the Murdoch lapdogs took it all up and drank the Kool-Aid that he was serving. It's disgusting. And we should all be embarrassed that anybody that you know voted for that kind of monstrosity to occur. Okay, speaking of Rupert Murdoch, that brings me to my next topic. The Americans would like him gone. So they're kind of the opinion, no more Mr. Rupert Murdoch. Withstanding the fact that he's an American citizen, and that I don't think he's an Australian citizen any longer, but he may be a dual citizen. Okay. Twitter foes call for Rupert Murdoch to be deported after peddling Fox News lies. Twitter critics are lining up to demand Australian-born right-wing media Rupert Murdoch to be stripped of his US citizenship and deported after undermining American democracy with a cascade of recently revealed lies by Fox News about the 2020 presidential election. Mr. Murdoch, whose media operations frequently rail against immigration, became an American citizen in 1985. Yeah, seems a little bit weird that he's so anti-immigrant as an immigrant. You know, this is like pure projection. It's like the Orange Man. He likes to project this purely, I'm a strong man, while being a gutless fool that hides in bunkers. Murdoch, whose media operations frequently rail against them, which allowed him to circumvent a law barring foreign nationals owning more than 20% of US broadcasting license. Fox News host Tucker Carlson had an ironic moment on air just last year about the damage foreign-born billionaires can wreak a nation. Yeah, let that one sit for a moment. The anchor, a huge anchor for Fox News, was like, oh yeah, I get to tell you the narrative of immigrants and their role in our country. I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, it's almost as if Tucker Carlson is like a sketch on himself. Despite Murdoch's lucrative switch, he's apparently no big fan of US democracy. He and Fox News continue to peddle Donald Trump's baseless claims of a fraudulent presidential election. And that news host and executives didn't believe, according to the bombshell brief earlier this week. Murdoch blasted memorably unhinged press conferences by Trump and ally Rudy Giuliani and the lawyer Sidney Powell after the Trump election loss that bizarrely claimed voting machines were being done with, it's itchy on the side of my nose because I'm all sweaty. Okay. Trump's election loss bizarrely claimed that voting machine software had been manipulated in a plot spearheaded by Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, who has been in the grave for 7 years by then. Really crazy stuff and damaging. Murdoch wrote in the 2020 text message revealed in a brief filed Thursday returning is of a Dominion voting system. The company is suing Fox News and its parent corporation for $1.6 billion alleged defamation. Carlson said in a message obtained by Dominion that Power was lying about having proof of the wild claims, called Trump a demonic force. According to the brief, Fox executives were so worried about the danger Trump posed that they refused to allow him on Lou Dobbs' program on June 6, 2021, deeming that to do so would be irresponsible, the brief noted. Yet despite that, Fox's Rupert Murdoch continued to support Trump in the tale of a rigged election to pander to the former president's supporters. And now they are saying go. They don't want him there anymore. When you do that much damage to a country's democracy, oh, absolutely. You shouldn't be allowed to stay there, but we don't want him back here. So that's where that particular issue lies. I do not see it going well, but good luck, America. Here's your problem now. Okay. Well, just cleaning up. So the Reserve Bank has given an option to change our money scheme. And in doing that, Reserve Bank offered Treasurer the choice to have King Charles on the Australian banknote. But instead, it's opted to go with early this month, the RBA announced that King Charles would not replace the Queen Elizabeth on the banknote. Instead, it would feature a design honouring the history and culture of the First Nations people. That is going to happen. But while we're talking economics, while I think this is a wonderful idea, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. Running the economy off the poor. This is precisely how things have gone for a while. And just so you get an understanding of exactly what I mean, Amy Remkes, for pointing out the human toll running the economy on the backs of the unemployed people and needless international cruelty of keeping Centrelink payments below the poverty line. This should be a central part of the discussion in the RBA. A certain level of unemployed people built into the economic infrastructure as a way of lowering inflation. Under this thinking, Australia's leaders seem incapable of balancing actual employment with inflation, meaning some people are always made to suffer. Officials know this, and yet they don't pay unemployed people above the poverty line, even though it's by being employed, they are essentially taking one for Team Australia. Let that settle in. The unemployed are holding up the economy in a way that they just shouldn't have to, by doing jobs around the country that should be paid and paid for very well. But because we like to exploit them and it's easy to attack the poor, that's what we're doing. Still running on the economy. We should look at lowering the pension age for Aboriginal people by at least 10 years. Shorter Indigenous life expectancy should mean lower pension age for the Indigenous community. A landmark case has shown that that's precisely what we should do. Landmark case for Indigenous man seeking to access pension 3 years early. Here's Australia fails to account for age gap from racial disadvantage. First Nation Australians should be granted access to the pension at a younger age due to a gap in life expectancy, which closely connected to the race of federal court has heard. A full federal court on Monday commenced hearings in a landmark case brought against the Commonwealth by a 65-year-old Indigenous man, Uncle Dennis, who is seeking to access a pension 3 years early. Figures produced by his barrister, Ron Merkel, KC, on Monday suggested the 65-year-old Indigenous man will live for a full 15 years on average compared to 19 years for a non-Indigenous man. There is a long historical disadvantage which embedded structurally into the Aboriginal and Indigenous society in Australia, in direct cause of this life expectancy gap. The relief that we're seeking is to remove the historical racial disadvantage and discrimination to correct the wrongs of the past and against Indigenous people. Those wrongs have been produced in a gap in life expectancy which closely connected to race. Uncle Dennis is a Queensland-born Waka Waka man. I'm sure I just butchered that. And apologies to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander that finds that pronunciation offensive. Was requested that his surname be withheld, had previously lodged a claim to receive the pension, but it was rejected because he had not reached the pension age, now 67. He argued that if retiring Indigenous men were expected to live for 3 years fewer than non-Indigenous men, then their pension age should be 64. His case argues that the Commonwealth's failure to accommodate for the differences in life expectancy in the pension breaches Section 10 of the Racial Discrimination Act. Overall, life expectancy for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men is estimated to be 71.6 and 75.6 for females, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. This compared with the life expectancy for non-Indigenous Australians of 80.2 years for male and 83.4 years for female. The case will be brought by the Human Rights Centre alongside the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Services, VALS, and from DLA Piper. Narita Wright, Chief Executive, VALS, said Australia was on track to meet the closing of the gap target to reduce life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people by 2031. The gap in life expectancy is a direct result of decades of racial colonial policies, which is lowering the age of Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, and the age pension is simply a practical measure that will meaningfully respond to its history and systematic discrimination and that causes people to die before their time, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and I hope the man is successful in his plight to see that as a good-natured way of addressing those issues. We have to do this in good faith, which is why I'm such a big campaigner for The Voice, because the issues like that will be taken to them and it will rectify some of these wrongs that we clearly systematically attack these communities without even a second thought. Like raising the pension age was already an awful thing to do. But to do so without taking into account what would happen to our Indigenous people was even worse. I don't even think that they were thought of in that sense. Another point that I want to point out is that they don't even take into account the type of work that you're doing. It's just this blanket age, regardless whether you're a bricklayer or an office worker, which is disgraceful. Okay. Angus Taylor's scare campaign. What I've noticed is that an idiot will always be an idiot, and trying to stop them saying some, hold on, sorry. And trying to stop an idiot from saying something stupid is always preferable. But with the LNP, they are their own verbal diarrhea, and they will cause their campaigns to look incredibly stupid. Meet Angus Taylor, the jamland rorter that doesn't understand that people do not have $2 million in super. So no, this won't affect the average Australians. This will affect a very small amount of people that have nothing to do with this particular scheme. What do I mean when I say that? This means that the people that he's trying to scare on what will happen to their super, nothing will happen to him. It's a weird thing that he's trying to go after. Check out Natalie Barr not letting him off for these ridiculous answers.
If the average super balance in Australia is $150,000 and 2/3 of Australians have less than $100,000 in super, if we're talking about only hitting people who have millions of dollars in super to pay for things like health and defence and aged care, could there be an argument in favour of that? Is that the right thing to do?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on all the possible options that the government
sounds
might
like that's
consider.
what they're talking about.
What I am
So
going to
let's
say
say
is that
they
they're
are.
talking a lot about that. They're talking about taxing your super more, and they're talking
Well, not
about
mine, because
spending
I haven't
that
got
super
2
on
million.
pet projects.
So maybe yours.
I'm talking about Australia. Well, you know, it's very clear that they've been talking for weeks now.
She got him.
Going right back, but particularly in the last few days, about how they can come after people's super. Now, the point here, now it's very simple. They made a commitment. The Prime Minister made an unambiguous commitment on this. We had an election in 2019 about coming after people's money through tax, and it's the wrong thing now to break that commitment.
So I guess is it fair to be Robin Hood on this, to rob the rich to pay for the poor? Because that sounds like that's the plan, and you're against that.
Well, we don't know what the plan is other
But
than
let's say that's what it is, because it sounds like it. Because all governments, I mean, let's face it, all governments break. I mean, you guys said you were going to do a federal ICAC. It never happened. I mean, we could get the list of broken promises for every single government, couldn't we? So let's say that's it. You're still against it?
It's a big deal, Nat.
Yeah?
It's a big deal if the government's coming after your money. It's Australians.
Well, not
Australians'
mine
money.
again,
It's
because
not the
most of us
government's
don't have
piggy
millions
bank.
of dollars, but it will be coming after some people's money, yes.
But Nat, they're talking about spending that money on their pet projects.
Well,
They're
aged
talking
care,
about,
health, defence is probably not a pet project. I'm just wondering if that's a good idea. I'm just getting your opinion.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's Australians' money. You do have money.
Yes.
Most Australians have money, some money in super.
But he's failing. He was trying to scare people into thinking that it's everybody's money that they're after. No, they're after the millionaires that are using super as a route to squirrel money away and not pay the appropriate tax bracket. And that's precisely what the ALP is saying. Let's address that issue. And Natalie Barr wasn't having it. She's like, I don't have $2 million in my super. What are you talking about? It was an absurd comment made. And he does voters. If you know of a conservative voter, make them a little bit less stupid and show them videos like this. Like, I have no idea where they come up with their stupid responses. But this has to be one of the most, there is a long litany of stupid in the LNP, but this is just, I'm not shocked anymore. It's wrong. Okay. Now we're going to bump over to the New South Wales election. Turns out that is quickly approaching. I'm a Queensland resident, but I'm rooting for Labor to take over in New South Wales, particularly if they want to privatise the water, which will make it exponentially more expensive. And no, please, every time they justify selling something like this, like the power grid, and then they gold-plated the whole thing, and it's no, not. This is a bad idea by an idiot. And let's see how this one fares out. Because it turns out New South Wales shut the Parliament down. And I just... sorry, I just got I have children that messaged me along the way, and I was thinking it might have been one of them that needed my attention. And they always do take precedence in my world. Sorry if that offends anyone, But when you have tiny humans, they always will, regardless of their age. New South Wales inquiry to continue despite Parliament being shut down as of Monday. The New South Wales government inquiries include one into the alleged branch stacking involving Dominic Perrott's brothers, continue despite Parliament being shut down as of Monday. Labor seized on the notice published by the Government Gazette on Thursday that said that the state's upper house would be meaning shut down from Monday. The government insisted that it was procedural after Labor raised concerns that the move could stop further inquiries into missing Liberal Party operatives or its final report into the John Barilaro trade scandal. In other words, I don't want to talk about it. New South Wales election is coming and you can't ask me questions. That's basically what has happened here. Labor are focused on political talks about this, and the upper house committees will continue to conduct their business up until the constitutionally mandated dissolution of Legislative Assembly. This is what the Conservatives do. They avoid having real discussions. Notice they're not talking about the Robodebt saga that they definitely did, and they knew it was illegal. I will not move past the road. So if you tune in each week, you will hear me rail against the Robodebt saga because I believe it doesn't get enough coverage, and I believe that that's a huge story, and the death toll to that can't be swept under the rug. You know, much like the pandemic, which seems everyone believes is gone, which it isn't. If you've had COVID, you know that it's deadly serious, and it will be a deadly moment if for some people that they do get it. Okay, so Lida Thorpe, turns out that they're not going to charge her. Here we go. New South Wales Police said that Lida Thorpe will not be charged after blocking its Mardi Gras float. Thorpe lay down in front of the New South Wales Police float on Oxford Street, momentarily stopping the parade from boos the crowd. In the police video posted on social media, the senator can be seen lying on the ground in front of the police float before being approached by two officers. She was escorted from the parade soon after and requested organisers for reportedly breaching the terms of her participation. Police have confirmed that the senator was not arrested and will not be charged. Thorpe was marching with the No Pride Genocide float organised by the Pride in protest. I don't agree with what she did. I understand blocking the police float, but this was such a huge thing for the gay pride people. Stopping it was not helpful either. I was only trying to grab headlines for herself, in my opinion, but okay. It's another stunt. Okay. So Google to start blocking content in Canada. So Google tests blocking content over there like they did here from social media in response to proposed online news laws. Alphabet Inc.'s Google is rolling out tests that block access to news content for the same Canadian users in what we'll say is a test run to run potential responses to the government's online news bill. The News Act of the House, Bill C-18, introduced in April by Justin Trudeau's Liberal government, laid out, that's a left government, by the way, the rules to force platforms like Meta's Facebook and Google to negotiate commercial deals and pay news publishers for their content. This is because the news industry is dying because people no longer seek it as credible much anymore, thanks to Rupert Murdoch. And Rupert Murdoch is losing a lot of money. So this is another way for him to grab money. We're briefly testing the potential product responses to C-18 that impact very small percentage of Canadian users. A Google spokesman said, "We run thousands of tests each year to access potential changes to the search." The tech giant confirmed the time-limited tests, which impact a random sampling of less than 4%. Other users in Canada will limit the visibility of Canadian and international use for varying degrees. This is a bad idea. Limiting people's information is not a good idea. But I sort of don't trust Rupert Murdoch's empire anyway. A spokeswoman for Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez said that Canadians will not be intimidated and called it disappointing that Google is borrowing from Meta's playbook. Canadians need to have access to the quality fact-based news and local national levels, and that's why we introduced the Online News Act. Tech giants need to be more transparent and accountable to Canadians. Last year, Facebook warned that it might block sharing news content on its platform in Canada over concerns about the legislation that would compel digital platforms to pay news publishers. A similar Australian law, which took effect in March 2021, after talks with big tech firms, led to a brief shutdown of Facebook news feeds in the country, largely worked. In other words, they've seen how they staunched Australians and they want to give it a go. Good luck, Canada. It's a shitty thing to do, but they're going to do it anyway because what really prevents them from doing it? I mean, seriously? Nothing. That's what makes this whole thing so disappointing. They don't have to tell you the truth. They just have to tell you something and then pretend like that's the news. Pardon me, like telling you that an election was stolen when it really wasn't, and that's why they're being sued. Okay, that's it for us tonight. I hope you had a wonderful viewing, and excuse my coughing. It is always lovely to see you. Have a wonderful evening, and see you same time, same place next week. Thank you. Bye.